Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Kyle corners Victoria, Holden and Claire's fun in LA. While Kyle Abbott will corner Victoria Newman, Holden Novak and Claire Newman will dominate in Los Angeles. Fans are aware of Kyle's strategy to win Claire back by traveling to Los Angeles to do or say whatever it is at this stage. Kyle's strategy screams dumpster fire, and if he didn't appear pitiful before everything, his trip to LA will make Claire's ick stick for him. To make matters worse, it appears that Kyle would use guilt to get Victoria Newman to give him Claire's lodging location. Although it is quite unlikely that Claire's mother will provide him with the address of Claire's location, he may still resort to pleading with her for it. However, there's a significant probability that he will sneak a glimpse at a text or obtain the information in some other dishonest way if she declines, which she probably will. Since Kyle is desperate, his actions will also be desperate. In any case, even though Victoria liked and supported Kyle and Claire as a relationship, the mother might comprehend Claire's decision to break up with the young Abbott following their encounter on October 13th. Speaking of Claire, she and Holden will be in Los Angeles, enjoying the finest single life possible. She accepted her friend's invitation to travel to Los Angeles so he could give her a tour because she finds him fascinating. Even though Kyle is a weasel, Claire, who is naive, finds Holden's confidence invigorating, but she must be careful not to let her guard down around him. Holden is a charmer and a player, so Claire should be on the lookout for him even though he would never damage or take advantage of her. Spoilers for the Young and the Restless. It sounds like the young woman will have a great time, that is, until Kyle spoils the enjoyment later in the week. Holden will take Claire to all the best places in LA, and the two of them will likely have a vesper. Kyle Abbott's obsession had officially reached a boiling point, and it was only a matter of time before his desperation boiled over into reckless action. Ever since Claire Newman ended things with him, Kyle had been consumed with a gnawing sense of unfinished business, clinging to the belief that their story wasn't truly over. To him, Claire wasn't just another failed relationship, she was the one person who made him feel alive again after the many failures and mistakes that had piled up in his personal life. Yet the very traits that drew Kyle to Claire, the honesty, the independence, the strong sense of self she had been fighting to build, were the same ones pushing her away from him, because Kyle's brand of love had begun to feel suffocating. His determination to reclaim her, though dressed up in romantic justification, was teetering dangerously close to obsession, and everyone around him could see it, even if Kyle himself refused to acknowledge it. That was why when he hatched the ill-fated plan to track her down in Los Angeles, it didn't come off as heroic or bold, but pathetic and invasive, a last-ditch gamble to insert himself back into Claire's life. Unfortunately for Kyle, the harder he pushed, the more transparent his flaws became, and Victoria Newman, Claire's fiercely protective mother, would soon become the unwilling gatekeeper of this next chapter in his downward spiral. When Kyle arrived at Newman Tower to confront Victoria, his eyes betrayed the sleepless nights, the restless energy of a man running on fumes and frantic impulses. He framed his plea as a son-in-law's right to fight for love, but to Victoria, it was obvious that this wasn't about love anymore, it was about ego, about Kyle refusing to accept rejection, and about his discomfort with losing control. He cornered her in her office, his words tumbling out too quickly, his tone alternating between faux sincerity and subtle manipulation. He reminded her how much she once supported his relationship with Claire, how she had spoken warmly of him and even praised the way he seemed to help Claire come out of her shell. Then, when that didn't land, he shifted tactics, leaning into guilt. Didn't Victoria want Claire to have stability, to be with someone who already knew her quirks and could protect her from the fast-talking players of the world? Didn't she see that letting Claire wander around Los Angeles with someone like Holden Novak was just opening her up to heartbreak? Victoria remained calm on the surface, but internally she was seething. The nerve of Kyle, standing there with self-righteous indignation, as though Claire were some fragile possession to be safeguarded rather than a grown woman making her own choices. Victoria pushed back firmly, refusing to give Kyle Claire's location, insisting that her daughter's decision had to be respected. But Kyle, in his desperation, wasn't about to let a simple no deter him. He pressed harder, dropping veiled hints about how he might just stumble across the information if it wasn't freely given. That made Victoria's protective instincts flare, because she knew exactly the kind of person Kyle was becoming. His desperation might drive him to snoop through her phone if given half a chance, or to manipulate someone else into giving him the details. It was one thing for him to profess his love, but the idea that he would stalk or invade her daughter's privacy was another entirely. Still, as angry as she was, Victoria couldn't entirely shake the guilt of knowing she had once rooted for Kyle and Claire to make it work. She had seen the tenderness in Claire's eyes, the spark of something new and hopeful, and she had believed that maybe Kyle had matured enough to be the partner her daughter deserved. But now, watching him unravel, Victoria could understand why Claire had pulled the plug after their last blowout. Claire wanted peace, independence, and the thrill of finding herself, not the suffocating weight of Kyle's unresolved insecurities. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Claire was experiencing exactly what she had hoped for: freedom, fun, and the intoxicating buzz of Los Angeles life, with Holden Novak acting as her lively tour guide. Holden, with his confident grin and devil-may-care charm, was everything Kyle wasn't in this moment: lighthearted, adventurous, and unburdened by emotional baggage. He whisked Claire from trendy rooftop lounges to sun-drenched beaches, from art galleries in West Hollywood to tucked-away jazz clubs only locals knew. To Claire, it felt like a breath of fresh air. For so long, her world had been defined by caution and second-guessing, by the trauma of her complicated past and the burden of always worrying about disappointing those around her. But here in LA, with Holden by her side, she felt like she could finally exhale, finally just exist in the moment without every step weighed down by expectation. Holden wasn't subtle about his interest either. He flirted shamelessly, but in a way that felt playful rather than predatory. Claire found herself laughing more than she had in months, dazzled by his confidence even as she reminded herself not to get swept up too quickly. She knew Holden had a reputation, a charmer, a player, someone who thrived on the chase. But he didn't strike her as dangerous, just exuberant, a man who lived for the thrill of connection. Part of her wanted to lean into that energy, to let herself enjoy a fling for once in her carefully controlled life. Still, a voice in the back of her mind urged caution, reminding her that Holden's effortless charm might not translate into long-term sincerity. She couldn't afford to be reckless, not after all the mistakes she had worked so hard to leave behind. Holden, for his part, relished playing the tour guide. He took Claire to hidden gems and whispered stories about Hollywood legends, weaving fantasy into reality until the lines blurred and the city itself felt like an adventure. At one point, he surprised her with a ride along the coast, the convertible top down, the salty breeze in her hair as they cruised along the Pacific Coast Highway. Claire closed her eyes and let herself feel the freedom of the moment, unbothered by the chaos of Genoa City, untouched by the weight of her family's expectations. In that instant, Kyle Abbott might as well have been on another planet. But soap operas thrive on the collision of worlds, and Kyle was determined to smash into Claire's new reality whether she wanted him there or not. As Holden planned a glamorous evening for the two of them, a night out at an exclusive lounge followed by a late-night Vesper cocktail on a balcony overlooking the city, Kyle was back in Genoa City scheming, certain he was running out of time. His frantic energy made him reckless, and Victoria knew it. Even if she kept her phone locked tight, Kyle was resourceful enough to track down the information he wanted, whether through Newman media contacts, flight manifests, or sheer manipulation. He told himself it was about love, about fighting for what he and Claire had, but deep down, a darker truth gnawed at him: he couldn't stand the idea of her moving on, especially with someone like Holden, whose effortless charisma highlighted all the ways Kyle himself had fallen short. The contrast couldn't be starker. Claire, radiant and carefree in LA, soaking up the vibrancy of her newfound independence. Holden, eager to show her the world and maybe, just maybe, win a piece of her heart in the process. And Kyle, simmering in desperation, poised to cross boundaries that could forever destroy any hope of reconciliation. When those worlds collided, it would be messy, painful, and utterly riveting, the kind of explosive drama the young and the restless lives for. Kyle's obsession with Claire wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about identity. For months, he had defined himself as the man who rescued her, the partner who steadied her when she faltered, the Abbot who gave her a sense of belonging despite the scars of her past. Losing her now, especially in such a definitive way, felt like erasure. Without her, who was he? Just another failed Abbot's son, desperate for love but always sabotaging it with insecurity and entitlement. These thoughts swirled in his mind like a storm as he stalked out of Newman Tower, frustrated by Victoria's refusal to give him what he wanted. His jaw clenched with the stubborn conviction that she was wrong, that everyone was wrong. They didn't understand that he and Claire had something worth fighting for. They didn't see the way she looked at him when she let her guard down, the softness in her smile when she believed in him. Those moments weren't lies. They weren't illusions. They were real, and he couldn't just let them go. Kyle's desperation only grew as the hours ticked by. He knew Victoria well enough to suspect that she wouldn't budge. If anything, she'd double down on keeping Claire safe from him now that she had seen his manipulative side. So, Kyle pivoted. He began thinking about back channels, people at Newman Media who might have handled Claire's travel arrangements, flight logs he could gain access to, even mutual acquaintances in Los Angeles who might recognize her if he casually dropped her name. Every avenue felt like a betrayal of her trust, but Kyle convinced himself that it was justified, because what they had was too important to abandon. He dressed it up as romance, but deep down, he knew it was obsession, plain and simple. Back in Los Angeles, Claire was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in Genoa City. She was too busy being swept up in Holden Novak's orbit. Holden had a way of making everything feel cinematic, whether they were walking down a bustling street lined with palm trees or sipping coffee in a tucked-away cafe. He made it seem like an adventure. Claire was used to living her life in the shadows, always careful, always cautious, but Holden's energy was contagious. He teased her for being serious, nudged her into dancing in the middle of the sidewalk when a street performer played a violin, dared her to try food she would never have touched back home. For the first time in a long time, Claire felt like she was really living, not just surviving. Holden noticed the glow returning to her face, the way her laughter rang freer each day, and he couldn't help but be drawn to her even more. He had met plenty of women in his time, but there was something about Claire, her combination of strength and vulnerability, her willingness to open up despite the scars of her past, that made him want to dig deeper. He played the role of the charming host, yes, but underneath it, he found himself genuinely invested in her happiness. He didn't know how far it would go or whether she'd ever see him as more than a friend, but for now, he was content to give her moments of joy and freedom. Of course, Holden's interest wasn't lost on Claire. She saw the way his eyes lingered a little too long, the subtle shift in his tone when he complimented her, the unspoken invitation hanging in the air. Part of her was tempted, deeply tempted, to give in, to see where this connection could lead. After all, she wasn't tied down anymore, and she deserved to enjoy life. But another part of her was cautious, haunted by the knowledge that Holden was a player by reputation. He might be sincere now, but what about tomorrow? Could she risk falling for someone who might break her heart just as easily as Kyle had? Still, the temptation grew stronger with every passing moment. On one particular evening, Holden took her to a rooftop lounge that overlooked the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles. The skyline stretched endlessly, dotted with twinkling lights, the kind of view that made you believe in possibilities. He handed her a Vesper martini, raising his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his smile lingering as their glasses clinked. Claire hesitated, then smiled back, whispering, "To new beginnings." For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that she could truly start over. But fate, and Kyle Abbott, had other plans. Back in Genoa City, Kyle's scheming finally bore fruit. Through a combination of snooping and charm, he managed to coax a junior assistant at Newman Media into giving him a piece of information she shouldn't have. It wasn't much, just a mention of Claire's flight destination, but it was enough. Within hours, Kyle was booking his own ticket, convincing himself that he was doing the right thing. "She needs to hear me out," he muttered under his breath as he packed a hastily thrown-together suitcase. "She just needs to remember what we had." His heart pounded with a mix of dread and exhilaration as he boarded the plane, oblivious to how deeply misguided his actions were. Victoria, meanwhile, couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Kyle was up to something. His desperation had been too raw, too uncontained, for him to simply let go. She considered calling Claire to warn her, but she hesitated, not wanting to alarm her daughter or spoil her trip. Besides, maybe she was wrong. Maybe Kyle had finally hit rock bottom and would choose to lick his wounds in private. But something about the look in his eyes, wild, determined, unyielding, made her doubt it. In Los Angeles, Claire and Holden's adventures continued, culminating in an invitation to a private industry party. Holden, who had connections in nearly every corner of the city, promised her a night of glamour unlike anything she'd experienced before. Claire was hesitant, unsure if she was ready to step into that kind of scene, but Holden coaxed her with that easy grin, promising to stay by her side the entire night. True to his word, he was attentive, guiding her through the crowd of glittering celebrities and socialites, making her feel like she belonged. It was intoxicating, a world so different from the one she had known, and for a while, she let herself get lost in it. But just as she was starting to relax, to revel in the possibility of something new, the past came crashing back, literally. Kyle Abbott showed up. He spotted her across the room, his eyes locking onto her like a predator finally finding its prey. Claire froze, her glass halfway to her lips, her breath catching in her throat. Holden noticed the change immediately, following her gaze to see Kyle striding toward them with a look of grim determination. The easy smile vanished from Holden's face, replaced by wary suspicion. "Kyle," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. "Claire," he replied, his tone dripping with emotion. "We need to talk." Holden stepped protectively in front of her, his body language making it clear that he wasn't about to let Kyle bulldoze his way in. "She doesn't owe you anything," Holden said coolly. "If she wanted to talk to you, she would have picked up the phone." Kyle's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with barely contained anger. "Stay out of this," he snapped. "This is between me and Claire." But Claire, regaining her composure, shook her head firmly. "No, Kyle. This ended between us. You don't get to show up here and demand my attention. Not anymore." The confrontation sent shockwaves through the party, guests whispering and casting curious glances as the drama unfolded. Holden placed a steadying hand on Claire's back, silently offering his support, while Kyle's expression shifted from anger to desperation. He began pleading, his voice breaking as he insisted that they could work things out, that what they had was too special to throw away. But instead of rekindling the spark, his words only reinforced what Claire already knew. Kyle wasn't fighting for love, he was fighting to control her, to bend her to his will. For Claire, the choice had never been clearer. She turned to Holden, her eyes softening with gratitude, then looked back at Kyle with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "I'm sorry, Kyle," she said. "But this isn't love. This is desperation. And I can't be part of it anymore." Kyle's face crumpled as the reality set in. For the first time, he realized that he had truly lost her, not because Holden had swooped in, but because his own actions had driven her away. He had cornered her one too many times, and now, there was no going back. The silence after Claire's words hit Kyle harder than any slap could have. For a moment, the noise of the party seemed to fade into nothing, leaving only the sound of his ragged breathing and the weight of his humiliation. Guests tried to pretend they weren't watching, but their sideways glances and hushed whispers were impossible to ignore. Kyle's cheeks burned, his pride shredded in public for all to see. He opened his mouth as if to speak again, but nothing came out, just a choked gasp of air that betrayed his broken state. Holden, ever the steady presence, leaned closer to Claire and whispered, "Do you want me to walk him out, or do you want security to do it?" Claire shook her head, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "No. He'll leave. He has to." Kyle looked at her one last time, his eyes glassy with a mixture of fury and grief. But this time, he didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply turned on his heel and stormed out of the lounge, his exit as dramatic as his arrival, the heavy slam of the door echoing behind him. For Claire, it was both a relief and a heartbreak. The boyish charm that had once captivated her was gone, replaced by the fractured image of a man consumed by his own desperation. She knew in that moment that their chapter was closed forever. When Holden gently guided her to a quieter corner, Claire let out a shaky laugh. "Well," she said, her voice laced with irony, "so much for a carefree trip." Holden smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Hey, don't let him ruin this for you. You deserve better than to let his drama define your story. Tonight is still yours if you want it." His words were simple, but the sincerity behind them made her chest tighten. Maybe Holden was a player, maybe he wasn't, but at least right now, he saw her, not as a possession, not as someone to control, but as a woman who deserved to choose her own path. Back in Genoa City, Victoria Newman received word of Kyle's stunt before he even touched down. A contact in Los Angeles called to inform her of the scene he had made, and though she wasn't surprised, she was deeply disappointed.